Hi everyone. I want to talk about a essay that I'm writing at the moment on Apuleius's Golden House, and it's a novel that was written in the 2nd century AD, and it's written in Latin, so it's in the Roman period. And I'm going to talk about the 5 different interpretations, the 5 different readings, common readings of the novel, but first I'll go through the general plot line. So the protagonist is a guy called Lucius, and we find out that he is fascinated by witches and magic. So he goes to visit his aunt in Greece, who is supposedly a witch, and he arrives there and stays at this man's house called Milo, and Milo's wife is a witch. While he's staying at Milo's house, he gets into a love affair with the slave girl there called Fotis, and Fotis knows a bit of magic herself, it turns out. But Fotis and Lucius spy on the wife of the household, who is a witch. They spy on her turning herself from a human into an owl and flying out of the window. And Lucius wants this himself. He wants to be able to fly. And because Fotis knows a bit of magic, she goes, "Okay, I'll try." And I've seen my mistress do this a lot of times before, so I should be able to do it. She accidentally turns him into a donkey instead of an owl. And she tells him that the antidote to the spell is for Lucius, who is now a donkey, to eat roses. But something unfortunate happens, because the next day robbers come and rob the whole house and take Lucius to help store all of the things as they leave and travel on their journeys. So he's trapped in this donkey's body. He's not with Fotis anymore, who was going to help him turn back into a human. And he does find some roses on the way, but he thinks to himself, if I eat these roses, I'll turn back into a human. I'm still in the robber's company, and they'll just see me as a magician and they'll kill me. So he decides not to do that. And there are many other adventures that he goes through. He's quite it's quite an unfortunate story. He's not lucky. There's lots of hardship put on him. Nobody knows that he's a human. He can't speak, but he still has the mind of a human in a donkey's body. And we get to book 11, where he's on this beach and just wishing for something to change. And the goddess Isis appears in his dreams and tells him that she will turn him back into a human if he worships her for the rest of his life. The following day, there is the parade for the goddess Isis in the city, and Lucius goes into the procession, and the head priest who's leading the procession has a garland of roses in his hand, and Lucius eats those roses and turns back into a human. And then the rest of the book, he is worshipping the goddess Isis. So that's the main plot of the story. But as you're reading it through, it seems like all of the previous books leading up to book 11, where it turns really religious and pious, it seems to just be an entertaining comic novel, and then suddenly out of nowhere he joins the cult of Isis. So now I'm going to talk about the 5 different interpretations of the novel, and I'm getting these ideas from the book by John Winkler, who wrote an important study on this work and really got this novel by Apuleius studied properly for the first time, because previously either book 11, the religious book, would just be studies to learn about religion, or the sexual, violent nature of all of the adventures leading up to that point would be studies to learn about morality in the Roman world. And the novel never really got studied as a novel in its own right, and trying to interpret the actual story as a whole, because it makes such a pivotal turn at the end. So one interpretation is that it's a philosophical work. Apuleius translated some of Plato's works, and you can see it in some of the inserted tales in the novel, especially the tale of Cupid and Psyche. There are Platonic meanings behind that tale. Plato wrote about the soul, and you can see this story, the myth of Cupid and Psyche, that Apuleius creates, it's about their love, essentially, and the barriers to love. Cupid is a god and Psyche is a princess, and Aphrodite is Cupid's mother and doesn't want him to marry Psyche. So there's all of these barriers. Psyche has to go through different labors, and eventually they get married at the end. So it can be read as like the earliest version of a fairy tale, but also a philosophical interpretation of the soul's progress. And at the end, I'm going to talk about how all these interpretations are united by one key theme, and I'm going to ask you whether you can try and figure out what links all these interpretations together. That's the first interpretation. It's philosophical. Another interpretation is that it's a religious text. It's all about just praising the goddess Isis at the end. And that relies on that book 11, which is sort of the only really religious part of it. Other readings are that the novel is simply a problem in literary history, because the novel itself is based on a work supposedly by Lucian, although it might not be by Lucian, that's called Lucius or the Ass. And the plot is exactly the same, but Apuleius adds all of the inserted tales, and so that includes Cupid and Psyche story, and the ending, the sort of reverse ending that nobody expects. The other interpretations of the novel are, one, that it is an autobiography. St. Augustine is one of the only ancient writers who talks about the Golden Ass and tells us that it is a complete autobiography. This probably is because St. Augustine was a Christian and believed in monotheism, and this conversion that Lucius goes through at the end of the novel, converting from paganism, believing in the Roman gods, to monotheism, just believing in one god or goddess, which is the goddess Isis. St. Augustine sees this as a move in a positive direction. So this is probably why he's commenting on the work. But he sees it as completely autobiographical, as in, this is Apuleius' story, and he wrote it down. He wrote down everything that happened to him after his journey ended. So he thought that he was a member of the cult of Isis. That's one reading, and certainly parts of the novel can be attributed to Apuleius' actual journeys. The final interpretation of the novel is that it is a work of sophistry, and the sophists were big during this time in the Roman Empire. In the 2nd century AD, it's a bit like, you could call it a bit like the Renaissance, where they looked back to classical Greek culture. The same happened here, but in the Roman world. And it happened especially in the Greek-speaking world, where Greek writers would look back to classical Athens and write in their Attic language and try to make some analogies towards Homer and Hesiod and philosophy that was made during that time. So I keep on running out of phone storage. So the sophists would hark back to classical Athens with the philosophy that was made there, the drama, the art, and this, it has been argued, is one example of this. Apuleius is harking back to classical Athens, using analogies, and the other key feature of sophistry is that it's about showing off. It's about rhetoric and being a good speaker, being a good orator, and composing your work in such a way that it's mimicry. You're copying what has been done in the past, but you're changing it slightly. So it shows your intellect, it shows how cultured you are from knowing these previous works, but you also change it and put your own twist on it slightly. Okay, so I'll just outline the 5 different interpretations quickly. We have, it's a showcase, a sophistic showcase. It's a philosophical novel, it's a religious novel, it's an autobiography, and it's simply a problem in literary history. It was just copied from the text by Pseudo-Lucian. So what do those 5 interpretations have in common, do you think? I'll give you just 5 seconds to think. What they have in common is that they all privilege what Winkler calls a master text. And they all view the novel as incomplete in some way. So parts of the novel can be read in an autobiographical way, for example, but it is incomplete, and this reading wouldn't be reached without a master text. For example, we know from Apuleius' other works, he wrote an Apologia, and I think that is basically an autobiography talking about his life. And we know from that work of his that some of the events that happen in the novel happen to him as well. Another example is the works of Plato influencing him. So without Plato's text, we wouldn't have the philosophical reading that we have from Cupid and Psyche. But the master text can also be within the novel itself, such as Book 11, where you have the goddess Isis saving Lucius, and then it all becoming about piety and worshipping the god. And Winkler's point is, and I think it's a clever point, is that you can't interpret this novel without privileging either one part of the text itself, such as Book 11, or another part of the text outside, separate from the text, such as Lucian's work, Lucian's previous work, or Plato's work, or some of Apuleius' previous work that tells us about his autobiographical style and his sophistry, his showcasing rhetoric skills, because he was also an orator in Carthage, North Africa. So I just wanted to share this with you guys. I hope you found it interesting. I would highly recommend you read The Golden Ass. It's really complex, and the more you read it, the more you can get out of it. Okay, goodbye. Have a good day.